Hi, I wanted to share the build I used in my most recent Oblivion Remastered playthrough, well, my second Oblivion Remastered playthrough, as it was a pretty fun run through the game for me. It's a melee build that in my own personal headcanon, I kind of spin it as a by any means necessary zealot warrior archetype. It's pretty tanky, stacking heavy armor, high levels of damage reflection, magic resistance, and spell absorption, but it's also a little bit devious. It can sneak around using high levels of chameleon, uses poisons and paralysis effects aggressively, and feeds its own powers by sacrificing summons and a little of its own blood. And its very heavily enchanted weapon saps an enemy's hope and will to survive. I would personally say this stops just shy of being a fully broken build. I intentionally stop short of getting 100% damage immunity and chameleon, and it can still get messed up by reflection since it's melee, particularly if you go all the way up to master difficulty. To add a little bit of tension, I do self-impose using a summon that reflects a little bit of damage on me whenever I kill it to refill my weapons or my magic gauges. It's kind of just a little bit of manufactured difficulty. In terms of difficulty, I usually start at Adept, and then for most of the content, I end up at Expert Journeyman, so like enemies inflicting expert levels of damage but only having Journeyman health. I do then turn it up to Master difficulty in both categories for like the end bosses and stuff like that, but I just don't like the feel of having the entire game set at Master. So build details. Going with a Breton as the race, and the birth sign is the Atronach to stack the Breton's magic resistance and the Atronach's spell absorption in parallel as a good starting point for magic defenses. I use the High Rock origin to boost speed a little bit at the beginning as well. Going to be making a custom class here, and the specialization is magic, and this is about getting a head start on magic skill levels more than anything else. While I do it a little bit, I absolutely hate spending time just casting spells into the air to get their levels to go up. So by using magic specialization, it just gives me a head start towards hitting the skill levels I need to start enchanting weapons and stuff like that. Primary attributes are strength and endurance. Speed is a very close 1B to those, with willpower, intelligence, and agility all trailing a bit behind those as I level up. Strength, endurance, and speed will all hit 100 first as we progress, and we'll all get overcapped via gear and the Ogma Infinium. And this is more feel related than anything. I like moving fast, I like having a lot of carry weight, and having a high health bars is certainly more forgiving when you're getting into melee. Alright, so major skills for the custom class. And one of the main things with me in major skills is I want them to be skills that I'm going to use and that I'm going to use often. Armor is the first one. That's to overcap weapon damage and armor effectiveness later in the game. Then we have Blade. It's a melee build. I'm going to be going with a short sword for this particular build. And short swords for me are kind of like this happy medium space where damage is okay. They attack quickly, which is important when a lot of your damage is actually coming from your effects that are enchanted on the blade, and they're light. So you can carry essentially twice as many of them as you can a longsword. The next one is a little bit more negotiable. That's block. Block is very handy early game, but it tapers off later in the game as your defenses get better. Since I'm in melee, I'm going with heavy armor. I just, for the vast majority of the game, it is better than light armor until you get to the very end game where they even up. I also just like that it's more durable and it's, less likely to break, less time spent repairing it. Then we have Alchemy. Early game, it's for making money predominantly, to sell potions so that I can afford to buy training, and also for poisons early game prior to having a heavily enchanted weapon. Later game, the poisons are still great, and I start stacking in more buffs and things like that. Also very handy since I'm an Atronach for making Magicka restore potions as well. Then we have Conjuration. I'm going to be using Conjuration a lot to refill my weapon and occasionally to refill my Magicka bar. And lastly, Restoration. Early game, it's great for healing. Later game, it's great for buffing. Just want to make a couple of comments on some minors of note as well. Alteration, going to want to get that up to 25 to cast Feather, and same with Mysticism, want to get that to 25 to cast Soul Trap. Going to want to get Destruction up to 50 to start getting the weakness stacking abilities, so I can put those on weapons. So weakness to magic, weakness to poison, weakness to various elements, those sort of things. Those are all great on weapons and in custom spells. And then finally, we want Illusion to get up to 75 to start casting custom paralysis spells. Next up, going to run through some of the gear. Going to start with jewelry and armor, and then finally get into the weapons. And I'll also preface this by saying that I save scum to get some of the gear here. Some of the jewelry pieces are farmable, and a lot of the sigil stones, I save scum those to basically get what I want to get. So the necklace I'm using is the Necklace of Swords. I got it in Firelight Cave. There's a little trapdoor you can kind of go through with a chest at the bottom of it that can spawn these things. Lots of damage reflection, which I'm going to be stacking in this build. And the blade fortification is nice early on. One of the rings I use is the Sorcerer's Ring. I was able to farm that from the Shrine of the Moth. There's the priest at the very end of that dungeon who can drop the best jewelry in the game. But it adds a massive chunk of spell absorption as well as a little bit of fortified magicka as well. And the last ring does not involve save scumming or farming, is the Ring of Khajiit, which adds a lot of chameleon and a lot of movement speed. I put a little bit of chameleon on this build, which I can essentially drink a potion to then cap over to 100%. Moving on to armor, the headpiece I use is the Blade Turn Hood, which is something you can get at the end of the Mehrunes Razor DLC area. It is a little bit weird to farm. You do need to enter that area with a level up pending and then save at one of the last bedrolls before you get to the end boss. He doesn't always give you the highest level of the item, so you sometimes have to reload back to that last bedroll, level up, and then farm him again to see if he drops the highest level version of it. But like the Necklace of Swords, this is adding a little bit of reflect damage, also adds a great chunk of shield and resist normal weapons. And it ties along color-wise very nicely with the Order armor. For our shield, we have Best Shield, which is the escutcheon of Chorrol. Lots of reflect damage on it, and lots of fortify endurance. It does have a nice long quest line as well, which is kind of worthwhile to do. The rest of the armor pieces, I'm using the Order armor set, which is from one of the extra DLCs that's exclusive to the remaster. But what's nice about it is when you get to level 20, you don't have to farm this. You basically do that quest, which doesn't take that long, and then you can talk to a guy and just get this complete set of armor anytime you want it. And all of these are boosted with Transcendent Sigil Stones, which you can start save scumming at level 17. I end up with 2 Resist Magic Sigil Stones, 1 Spell Absorption Sigil Stone, and 1 Chameleon Sigil Stone on all those little pieces of gear there. So the end result of all of that is that we have a character who has 85 base armor, stacking with 65 chameleon, 83% reflect damage, 90% magic resistance, and 90% spell absorption, with a few other odds and end buffs kind of thrown in along the way. Overall, very tanky, very defensive setup. Next up, weapons. I'm going to start with my primary weapon, which I carry 2 copies of, and that is an enchanted short sword from the Order set. And it's kind of like an everything bagel short sword here. Has a lot of different effects on it. First is Soul Trap for 1 second, so it can refill itself. We have Drain Health for 100 points for 1 second, and that is to kind of one-shot weaker enemies. Then we have a crowd control effect of Drain Fatigue on strike for 100 points for 1 second. This one actually ends up being pretty powerful. It literally knocks out most enemies in a couple of hits. This can also lead to a couple of different unintended funny effects as well. So in the Blessing in Disguise category, if you run into someone who's got a high level of reflect, you'll knock yourself out before you kill yourself, which is simultaneously funny and kind of actually effective from a defensive perspective. Also, if you hit certain quest NPCs, they'll just get very sleepy and fall over, but you can still talk to them when they're lying face down in the dirt.
I'm sorry, we've not met. I'm Janice Hasseldor.
Then the last few enchantments that are on there are for the more powerful enemies in the game. And this is kind of taking advantage of the weakness stacking mechanism of the game. So we have an elemental damage, relatively low amount of frost damage here. It's only 5 points. But you can really use any of the elemental damage types if you want. And then after that, and the order is important, after frost damage, you do weakness to frost and then weakness to magicka. 100% on both of those for 2 seconds. And that basically triggers the subsequent hits deal massive amounts of damage to the enemy kind of effect. And this weapon does not have a lot of charges. It is a short sword, so it's light, so I can carry 2 copies of it to mitigate that a little bit. You do need to kind of get into some habits. So there are a lot of enemies in the game whose souls you can't absorb to use to recharge it. Thankfully, a relatively high percentage of those enemies, like Zivilize and Necromancers and Conjurers, all have summons. So that good habit to get into when you come against those enemies whose souls you can't absorb is to kill their summon first, capture its soul into Azura's Star, then you kill the enemy and you can use their conjuration to refill your weapon. When you're running in areas that have lots of enemies who don't have conjuration, that's when you can actually summon your own Flame Atronach and sacrifice it, kill it, and absorb it to refill your weapon. Which brings me to my next weapon. I have a little dagger that I call my sacrificial dagger. I don't use it that often. It's mainly for when the main 2 short swords are out of charge, but it's basically set up to one-shot the Flame Atronachs I summon when I backstab them. So it's got Soul Trap on strike, drain health 100 points, and a lot of frost damage. Couple that with the huge damage multiplier that a dagger gets on a backstab, and you're going to be able to essentially one-shot summoned Flame Atronach with a single backstab. Then lastly is what I call my Siphoning Dagger, and it has, from a Transcendent Sigil Stone, the Absorb Magicka effect on it. And this character is an Atronach. He does not regenerate Magicka. It is possible you get into a situation where you're out of Magicka and you're out of potions to restore it. This is there so that, you know, when you're getting really low on Magicka, you can summon that Flame Atronach, which also has a Magicka pool. You can hit it with this a few times to bring your Magicka back up. So the weapons kind of have this like blood magic-y sort of vibe where you're summoning this sacrifice, this Flame Atronach. You kill it, and in doing so, absorb its soul to refuel your weapons, but you also take a little bit of damage too, so there's a bit of price in this kind of little sacrifice here. Next up, I'm going to talk about the custom spells that I use. The first one is my Summon Sacrifice spell. I summon a Flame Atronach for 8 seconds. It's pretty cheap to cast, and what I do is this is essentially there so that I can absorb its power and refill my weapons. Next up is any sort of basic healing spell. Numbers are completely up to you there. Just any sort of basic healing spell to recover health when you're taking damage. The third spell is my only kind of offensive spell, and it's this kind of touch curse where with a range of touch, I paralyze the target, I apply weakness to poison and weakness to magicka on it. And this is great when you want to be efficient in terms of the charges on your weapon against enemies whose souls you can't absorb, so a lot of Dromoras, vampires, things like that. This is very handy. And lastly is a buff spell. It is essentially just a long-term slow regen combined with Feather. And I've used several different versions of this through the progression of the game. They get to be really expensive if you stack too much stuff, so just this basic version of Restore Health and Feather makes you move a little faster and gives you this constant little supply of regen to help with the damage that you take. Next up are the potions I use. I have a library of 5 different potions that I use that kind of cover the bases. My first potion is a Regenerate All potion. This restores fatigue, restores health, restores magicka, and makes me invisible. And to make this, you need Blackberry, which you can get from Drakelow Farm, Aloe Vera, which you can get from the Anvil main gate or from Frostcrag, and stink horns and cairn bullets, which you can get from the Arcane University. I think you can also get them in Frostcrag as well. Next up is what I call my toughness potion. It's useful against bosses. Also, if you're in master difficulty, very useful as well. And it fortifies my health and fortifies my endurance for a really long time. This takes me from 550 health to 830, which is a little over a 50% increase. And the ingredients for this are a Cinnabore Polypore Yellow Cap, which you can get at the Arcane University, blackberries from Drakelow Farm, Lady Smock, which you can get at Frostcrag in the Arcane University, and Bloodcress, which you can get at Frostcrag. Then we have a triple damage poison, which is damage health, fire damage, and shock damage. This is using spittle sticks, which I think you can get in Frostcrag. Imp Gulls, which there's Robber Glen Cave where you can farm those. Fly Amanitas, which are kind of all over the place. And Ectoplasm, which you can get in the undercrofts of a lot of the temples. Then we have a paralysis poison. This is very handy early in the game before you can cast paralysis as a spell effect. And it does paralyze, frost damage, damage health, and silence. This uses Harada, Milk Thistle, Vampire Dust, and Nightshade. I think 3 of those you can get in Frostcrag. The Vampire Dust can also be Frost Salts, but usually Vampire Dust, which you can get in several of the Vampire Mines throughout the game if you ever need to farm it. And lastly, we have what I call my Stealth Potion. And this adds a ton of Chameleon and a ton of Fortify Speed. This essentially breaks the game for the period that this is active. When I drink this potion, my Chameleon goes all the way up north of 100%, which means that enemies no longer react to me. And this is done with pears, which you just have to find or buy. There's no farmable location for those. Anytime you see a pear, pick it up, put it in your pocket. Then wisp stalks, bloodgrass, and columbine or St. John's for the last one. And those ingredients you can either find in Frostcrag or the Arcane University. I do a lot of Oblivion gates, but by the time you've done 5 of them, they kind of start getting repetitive. So what I do is I defeat the enemies on the way up to the tower, and when I get into the tower, I drink this and then essentially run by everything to the top and get the Sigil Stone. It's for when you want to turn your brain off and relax. So a few last comments here. Gonna wrap things up now. General tactics. So most enemies, you're just gonna run up to them, smash them with your sword, and that's all you really have to worry about. If it's a tougher enemy or you're worried about burning through the charges on the sword, throw poison on there to make them go down a little bit quicker. Then there's this whole class of enemies that are casters that tend to run away. They're pretty annoying. Those ones I tend to use the paralysis poisons or the paralysis spells on just to make them drop to the ground so you can beat them to a pulp. But yeah, harder enemies, paralyze either with poison or with a spell, but mostly it's smashing people down with your sword. And because of that fatigue drain, a lot of enemies will just pass out after a couple of hits, and you can beat them to a pulp anyways. It's similar to them being paralyzed, but kind of funnier. I'm going to have a bit of an overview of the level progression going on in the background. Here's a bit of a wrap-up. Overall, I ended up the game at level 31, well, end of the main quest at level 31, which kind of perfectly got the kind of main, first 5 or 6 stats up to 100, which is kind of a nice feeling end position to have, strength, agility, intelligence, willpower, speed, and endurance all up at 100. From the perspective of equipment, though, you're basically done around level 25. That's when you can kind of get the last version of the escutcheon of Churl. Beyond that point, it's just boosting stats, which doesn't really do all that much. So yeah, if you make it to the end here, just show a little fight against the end boss on master difficulty. It's very easy. Well, upsettingly easy is honestly the general state of bosses in this game are kind of upsettingly easy. And that's about it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it was helpful to someone who's still playing this 9-month-old plus decades-old game. But yeah, thanks for listening.